Ladies and gentlemen, this is Joe's Classic Video Games, back with another cool pinball repair video for you this evening. We have been working on this Bally flip-flop from 1976, and we have done a couple videos on it already. If you didn't see those, go search them out. They're right here on our channel. But essentially, we kind of just did a big overview video showing what kind of shape it was in when we got it. Piece of history here, folks. And then second, we did a video showing us working this bottom board. We took it all out and fixed what we could and cleaned things and found all the little issues and put it all back. And we are now ready in this next video to move up into the back box. Glung, glung, glung. So that will be next. So I'm going to pull this thing out a little bit so we can get to the back. We're going to look at what we're starting with, and then we're going to get it all working, hopefully. We'll work through it. So basically, the point of all these videos, by the way, is so that if you've got one of these of your own, or you find one somewhere, that you'll be able to work on it yourself. And I'm just trying to show you that it ain't that hard. If I can do it, surely you can do it. So we're going to be doing several Ballys. We've got this flip-flop. We've got this Knight Rider. And we've got this Freedom. That's right, I got a whole row of them here. These are all Ballys from right around the same era, probably within a year or so of each other. I don't know when the Freedom was, but I'm going to guess 76. Knight Rider, probably 77, because they made it as an EM as well. And then Flip Flop was definitely the beginning of 76. So let me slide it out a little bit. We'll look in the back of it and figure out what we need to do. So here is the back box. Now the comment I get from most people is, man, I wouldn't know where to start. So we're trying to fix this thing. So that's what I'm showing you, is where to start. Just like that old saying, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time, right? So we're just going to start anywhere, really, but essentially, you just need to make sure all the switches are clean and that all of the stepper units work. And if you do that, the machine will work. And we can go back later and pinpoint little issues that pop up. But in general, we're just going to clean everything. So the first thing that I'm going to clean are these relays here. And then there's 4 of them up here, so I'll show you how we go about doing that. So there's a close-up of the switches we're talking about. Sometimes it's hard to figure out how to get to those back ones, but if you get like we use an old file that like doesn't have hardly any grit on it. You don't want anything crazy that's crazy abrasive because it'll eat away the contact, but something that's pretty much worn out, or a very 500 grit file or something like that. You can actually reach all the way back in there and do this front switch and the back switch at the same time. But basically, you're just trying to clean the dirt off of the contacts on it. Most of these are like silver contacts. And then you need to make sure that they are adjusted so that whenever the big blade moves, when the relay pulls in, that it touches and then moves slightly the small blade. So to see that one, and most of them look fine. That one all the way out looks like it's just barely moving the smaller blade. So it's adjusted fine. And then they should open when they come back out. Sometimes you'll get them like this, where there's 8 on one relay. Ugh, that's a pain. And then sometimes you get them where some of them open they're normally closed and they open when they pull in. And sometimes you'll get them where they go back and forth. They're closed this way and then they close to another one when they go in. This one doesn't really have any of those in the back box. But we're just trying to isolate and then conquer, so we're going to do the relays first. There's also some up here on this particular machine. These are latch trip relays. You don't see these as much, but basically this coil is the trip. So when you do that, this trips back out, right? You get the same thing. It's making them contact. And then this is the latch. When you pull it in, it latches in place and stays like that until this one trips. So see how this one's open right now when it's tripped? And then when it's latched, it's closed. And this one's open when it's latched and closed when it's tripped. So they should, the way you know what it should do is they should go backwards. So it should be one way and one the other way. So you don't really even need to know what this switch does or anything like that. You just go through and make sure that it looks like they're all moving one way or the other. So I've got these 4 here I want to clean, and then I have these 5 here I'm going to clean. These are the score reset ones, the ones that have 8, because they actually make 8 reels reset back to 0. So that's our very first thing. I'm going to clean those, and then once I'm done with those are out of the way, and we move on to something else. So I cleaned up the relays, didn't find anything weird. There were a few that looked like they weren't touching when it was pulling in, so I bent them slightly closer. Speaking of bent, this credit wheel is bent. So it's kind of one of those things where you just kind of have to bend it back. I don't know. I guess that's a little better. But it's just a stepper unit without a PCB on it. So one of the wheels, one of the coils, when it goes in, will take off the credit. And so through the front glass, you're seeing a number go down, probably down to 0 now. And then through this one, it will step it up 1. Never understood why they have it like that. Basically, you're not getting much movement out of it because there is a post here and a post here, and these switches are hitting it so that it won't keep going. And so you have a very limited amount of travel. Let me see. Let's see what it's on right now. 6 credits. 6 whole credits. Makes me wonder if this has been turned around. Because if these posts, if these switches were like on this side of the post, you could go all the way back around before it would hit it. So you could store like 30 credits on the machine, right? I see them like that a lot. So it's 5, 4, 3. A little sticky here. Let's see if that's 0. No, that's 1. That's probably how they chose to put it on free play. Well, I don't know about that either. I think, trying to decide if that's spun all the way around or not. I wonder if it shows that in the manual. Because if they've got a wheel that goes up to 25, it shouldn't bottom out when it gets to 6. That doesn't make any sense. Let me see if it shows that in the manual at all. So here is a picture of the credit replay unit, and look what I found. So there's a little post that opens up the switches when there's 0 credits left. And then look what they're pointing at here. See that little hole? 5 credit pinhole, number 1. 10 credits, pinhole number 2. 15 credits, pinhole number 3. 25 credits, pinhole number 4. So it depends on where the little pin is inserted. So on this particular one, they've just got it inserted in the first position. which means it only gets 5 credits. So that makes sense. Okay. So I've got to get that where when the wheel says 0, it opens up this switch. And when the wheel says 5, it opens up this switch. So a little bit of bending and make sure everything is proper. We might have to oil some of these pivot points too where stuff moves. So let me mess with that a little bit. I'm going to clean off the top of the wheel, but it's never going to say anything but 1 through 5, which is fine. Okay, so the previous owner has disconnected the wire from this coil and also from that coil. So basically, by doing that, he's making it where it never takes off any credits and never adds any credits, so it's always got credits on it. So that's just the way they chose to put it on free play. So we're going to leave it like that. But you still need to have those switches clean, because if the switches aren't making good contact, the game will not know that it has credits on it, because the only thing that tells the game that there's no credits on it is if that switch opens. So that's that. You also won't get a knocker sound, though, because whenever the game wins a free game, when it adds it on, this switch connects, and that's what makes the knocker work. So you won't get that crack sound whenever you win a free game, but that's fine with me. So next up, we're going to work on the player up unit. It's basically the same thing, except it has a board on it. But you see it's got the same 2 coil setup. It's got the same couple switches up in there in the same place. And you've got a spider over here like we messed with down in the bottom whenever we did those 2. So I'm going to carefully remove that so that we can look at the switches on the back of it here. Okay, so if you look at the back of this one, you can see that it is pretty much just like this one. It's modified slightly, so it has like this little board on the bottom. You can see that the mounting holes for it are actually on that one as well. They just don't use them. So we're basically trying to use the same pieces so they can mass produce it, you know. So it has one little post there that opens both of those switches when it gets back to the 0 position. And it's the same thing. You just need to get this one where it resets it and that one where it steps it up, or vice versa, whichever way it goes. And get it nice and clean and doing its thing. And then on the other side, we have to clean this board so that the contacts are all clean when the spider travels around on it. And you just take the screw loose, clean everything. We usually use like some really light sandpaper, 500 grit, 600 grit. Clean it up a little bit. Don't go crazy. You don't want to sand the traces away or anything. But get it nice and clean and shiny, and then we put some synthetic grease on it. So it's dielectric and conducts properly. You can see right now the way it's sitting. See how the teeth, see how the arms of the spider are touching 2 things at the same time? It shouldn't really be like that. So if it's doing that, first you need to see if it does it on every position, and if it does, sometimes this little bakelite board needs to be moved. There's a couple screws you can take loose to spin it a little bit. But a lot of times it's doing that because you're like halfway in between a step or something, and whenever you clean it, it all goes back together fine. But each time you hit it, it should step up 1, step back 1. But it should be on the pad, not on 2 pads at the same time. So I'll start messing with it, and we'll see if we get it where it steps up and down properly. Okay, so we cleaned it up, got the synthetic grease on there now. Whenever we pull it in, we want to see if it steps through right. So it's at position 1 right now. I don't know if I can do this with one hand. Maybe. Position 2, position 3, position 4, and that's it. So it's the player unit, so it's just keeping track of who gets the scores, you know. So it moves everything to the first player scores, or the second player scores, third player scores. And then whenever it resets, we need it to go all the way back to the first position, which it does. And it's not on two traces at the same time. So I didn't have to adjust the board. It just it must have been stuck between a step or something whenever we were looking at it earlier. So that is that. Now whenever it goes back to 0, like we said, it should open up that switch. And then let's see if once we get up to step 1, if the switches are closed. Yes. So that's that. So on to this, let's look at this weird little 0 to 90 unit. I don't think I've actually worked on one exactly like that. So I'll mount this back and then we'll unmount that and see what it looks like. Check this little thing out, 0 to 90 unit, and I confirmed it only does the match at the end of the game. So if you don't know about the old games, they had a thing called the match feature. So at the end of the game, if the last 2 letters of your score were 10, and this little unit was set on 10, there would be a 10 light that lit up on the back glass, and since that matched the last 2 of your score, you would win a free game. But since this one already has it's already on free play, kind of useless. You can do you can set it so that when you get the high score, you win a free ball, which kind of helps a free play game. But if you're playing a free play game and you win a free game, that's kind of useless. And you can't win a free ball with the match because it happens at the end of the game. So this is kind of useless in our scenario, but I can show you how it works. There are 2 little boards, and look, there's little wipers in there. It all looks pretty clean, actually. It looks like nobody's ever taken this apart. So because of that, it's still in decent shape. And so when the plunger pulls in, it just turns a little wheel around. Very similar, by the way, to the score reels. And as that spins around, there's a little wiper disc down there that moves around to contact different wires. And so one of the little wipers, it makes the free game happen. You know, so if it's on 30, and then on your 10s reel, it's also on 30. See the little board there? Then power goes through and gives you a free credit. Right? So that's what one of the wipers is doing. The other wiper is just making the light light up. So if the game over relay is on and the match plug is turned in to turn on the match, it makes it where the wiper on this side, or whatever side, lights up one of the match lights at the top of the back glass. Pretty cool. But this one looks pretty clean, so I'm not going to take it apart and mess with it. And we don't even really need it on this particular game because it's on free play. Unless we take it off free play. I guess that would change things. But we'll see. I'll have to ask Shane if he wants it on free play or not. I would imagine he does. Okay, so that's that one. We did this one. We did that one. We did those relays. We did those relays. Hey, you know what? There's not quite so much to do anymore, is there? We've ran right through it. Let's keep going. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is, these are Jones plugs. So this is how the board on the bottom, the mech board, connects to the back box. They call this the insert board. It has these little Jones plugs. Now, different companies, I guess, made different types. So these are a little shorter, actually, than a lot of the companies. They look pretty clean already. And they fit into these little sockets, which are also different depending on the manufacturer. But if you look, these sockets, they are a blade that's been around, and the other end kind of grabs the post as it goes through. Those can get bent out a little bit. So what I do is I go through and kind of squeeze them back together to make sure that they're going to grab that post good when it goes in. And then also, sometimes you'll get some of these that are really bent up. Also, take a little bit of sandpaper, really light sandpaper, and scuff up the legs, get them a little shinier, and then plug them back in, and it'll make better contact. So I'm going to do that. It'll take me a few minutes to clean all those little posts, the sides of them a little bit, and then we'll we'll plug that back in. Okay, so those cleaned right up very easily. And now we are on to the least fun part of the entire machine. The score reels will not work right unless you clean them, check them, and adjust the switches. So you got to mess with all of these suckers. And there's 16 of them. There's also 4 dummy score reels, which just has a 0 printed on the front of it. And the purpose of that is to make the scores all 1 digit larger. So you've got 4 score reels, which means the highest score you could get would be 9,999. But they put a 0 after it, which means that the highest score you can get is 99,990. So it's pretty cool. That must have been a big advance at some point. But you've got to go through them. 3 of them have a PCB on it. See how you've got a loop of wires going to this one, and that one. Those PCBs, if they're not clean, they will not work right. And the purpose of them is the one on the tens reel. Now remember, this is the 0 reel. The 0 through 9 reel is this fake one. So it's just always on 0. The one on the tens reel it does the match like we were talking about earlier. Okay, so that you need that board to be clean so that the game can tell what position it's in. If that board is not clean or the contact isn't clean, the match won't work. Which, again, on this game isn't that big of a deal. I'm going to clean it anyway, though, just because I gotta mess with the score reels anyway. The hundreds reel doesn't have any board on it because it doesn't need it. The thousands reel and the 10,000s reel both have boards on it because it needs that for the high score adjustment. So let's say you have it set to give you a free ball at 70,000 points. Well, it needs to know when this one is at 7 and when this one is at 0. So the way that it does that is with those boards. And there's no kind of computation or anything because there's no computer. So it literally, if this one is set on 7, that same wiper is connected over to here, and if it's on 0 on this one, and your high score jumper, little plug, is set on 70, then at the end of the game, everything lines up, or whenever you get to 70, everything lines up, and you win a free game, or you win a free ball, whatever it's set on. So there's no computation or, real intellect behind it. It's just literally things are connected, and whenever they're connected, it makes the free ball relay pull in or the free game relay or whatever, So it's just literally you're lining stuff up. So if one of those boards isn't clean or the little leg isn't touching it right, your high score thing won't work. That's literally all it does. So you don't have to clean them, but your high score might not work if they're dirty, or your match might not work if they're dirty. But you still have to clean and adjust all of the switches anyway, right? So I'm going to go through and clean everything, including the boards, and adjust the switches. I'll probably find some screwed up switches, and when I do, I'll show you what happens to them. A lot of times the wire will break off one of these switch stacks or something. And I'll show you just how that all works. Basically, there's a lever inside of the score reel that at certain numbers on the front of the score reel closes and opens certain switches so that for the same reason, so that the game can have things wired through that to make certain things happen. So I'm going to get started cleaning them. Let me pull the first one out. Each company does them a little different. These have a little lever that you pull up, and then the thing pops out of place. So it's now upside down, right? So the first thing I'm going to do is take this clip off and pull this reel off so that we can see what's down underneath it. Okay, so the way I take them off is in one piece. You see those 3 screws? You could take the reel itself off of this cam if you'd like, which would make it easier to take the cam out. So you might want to do that since if you haven't done a bunch of them. I can kind of just finagle them out of the way and pull it out with my hand when I'm using both hands. To where it's not that big of a deal for me, but if you haven't messed with them a lot, you might want to take it apart like that. But basically there's a little horseshoe wiper on the back that just rides around. That middle ring is basically like a ground or the source, and then depending on what number you're at, you're touching a different pad. So it's the exact same way that the little match 0 to 90 unit is working. This one's actually clean too, you know, so you could probably get by with not doing it. I'm gonna do it anyway though. But you can see this little this little lever here that rides in that little track, right? And see how that track is like just weird shaped, it's not round. That's so that when it gets to certain numbers, it pushes this little pin one way or the other to make switches close and open. So we'll talk more about them here in a little bit, but I'm going to clean this up and just go through it. Sometimes you have a something damaged or something, but this all looks pretty good. You don't have to lubricate anything. You just need to clean it. You can put a little synthetic grease on that board there if you want, but you don't have to oil anything or anything like that. You definitely don't want to oil coils. Bad idea. A lot of people do that, but it's a bad idea. So I'll clean that, put it all back together, and then I'll show you how these switches work. One thing to keep in mind, whenever you clean these letters, the numbers, I mean, certain companies and certain eras, if you get these wet, the numbers will wipe right off. So you got to be careful with that. Test one first. You might not want to test one on the first player, too, by the way. You might want to go find the 8 on the 4th player and test it on that. But what typically happens is they'll sit for many years, and maybe this one had a, let's see if we can tell. Boop, 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 boop. Yeah, maybe this one had a 6 on it. And so what happens is whatever's up gets all filthy because of just dirt and dust settling on it. And whatever was displayed out the front is clean, and whatever's on the bottom is clean, but the top's dirty. So you got to clean them off just so they look good looking through the window, because that's the only part of the score reel you'll actually see. So yeah. All right, so I'll clean it up and put it back together, and then I'll show you how the switches work. So riding on top of all of these reels are 3 switches. See how the bottom one's open? I'm calling this the bottom one. The bottom one's open, and the middle one and the top one are closed right now. And we are on 5, okay? So if I move along, 6, 7, 8, it all stays the same. And then 9, when you get to 9, the little lever moves and it closes the bottom one too. So now all of them are closed. And so the reason it does that is so that the next time this reel gets some points, it will, through that switch, add points to the next reel. So that's how like the 90 goes to 100. Because this one, when it goes one more step, is going to go to 0. So it needs to carry the 1 over to the next thing. Now this happens to be the 10,000 score reel, the first one. So the reason that there is a 1 on there, it can't carry over to the next reel. There is no reel. But on some of these games, they started putting 100,000 point lights on it. So there must be a light that comes on when you get to 100,000 points on each player. I haven't found it yet, but it's on there somewhere, I will assure you. And so the light just lights up and says 100,000 points. It might be in the wagon. Maybe the wagon will, but there's got to be one on all 4 of them. So something will light up and say 100,000 points. I could cheat and take the glass off, but I'm trying to just see it. And I don't. Maybe it's in a different place on each player. But it'll say 100,000, it'll be lit up, and then it'll say 200. Or, you know, because after this gets there, it's going to roll over. After it gets up to 99,000, it's going to roll over to 0 again. So, wonder where it is. Maybe I can shine a light in the back of it and see. I found it. You can just barely see it, but it's there. So there will be a light there that comes on that says 100,000 points when it rolls over. So that's what that switch is for. But the one on this reel is to carry this over, to make this 0, 9, 1, 0. You know what I mean? To carry it over one. And this to the light. And so the light is held on by these relays at the top, which I guessed on the first video, but I have now been vindicated. Okay, so that's what it does at 9. And then whenever you get to 0, all 3 of them open. So the 9 one opens because you no longer need to send a pulse to get the next reel to turn. You already did that on 9 when you went from 9 to 10. And then the other 2 open. So why do they open? It's not for during gameplay. It's for when the game resets. So one of these 2 that open, basically when the game resets, the reset relay and these 2 score reset relays both get pulled in by I guess the start relay or whatever they call it on the Bally's. Well, instead of guessing, let's see if I can, by the game over relay. If I switch on the game over relay. Now you might think, why would the game over relay do that? That's just what they called it. So one of these switches resets when this reel gets back to 0. Opens up when this reel gets back to 0. So why does it do that? It's because it's fed in line from the score reset relay so that it stops at 0. If that switch wasn't there, when these things start pulling in, pop, 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 over and over and over again, it would just keep counting over and over and over again. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0, 1. It would never stop at 0. So since they run the power through that switch that opens at 0, as soon as it gets back to 0, it stops. And this thing can just keep on clanking away, which it will if one of the other ones isn't to 0 yet. So let's say this one's hanging a little bit. It takes it a little longer. Well, let's say that this one's already on 9. Well, it only takes it 1 step, and it gets to 0. But this one's at 1, and so it takes it 9 steps to get to 0. And maybe this one's a little dirty, and it takes it 15 steps to get to 0 somehow. It's like Sleepy from the Seven Dwarfs. It lags behind. Or was that Dopey? One of them. You know, there's always one behind, right? So they've got 16 of them that they've got to get back to 0. So some of them get back to 0 first, and then to get them to stay at 0, that one switch opens up. Well, they have the power to the reset relays, including the score reset relays and the regular reset relay, that will stay powered until all 16 of them get back to 0. So the way they did that was they ran the power to that through 16 of these switches. So 15 of those switches, maybe the middle switch there, 15 of those can open up, and it'll still hold the reset relays in, because it's basically saying, you know, you've reset 15 of them, but one of them is not reset yet, so keep resetting. And it makes the score reset relays and the reset relay just keep doing their thing. When that 16th one, if everything's adjusted right, when that 16th one gets to 0, it too will open up, and now there's no switch on the relay still sending power to the reset relay. So now that will cause the reset relay to drop out. If everything else is reset that's supposed to, so maybe it's supposed to reset the player unit. Maybe it's supposed to reset the bonus unit. And all of those have a similar kind of thing. They'll keep the reset relay still doing its thing until all of the ways that it can get power turn off. I don't know specifically how they do it, but that's basically the gist of it. And all of the companies did a similar thing. They would figure out a slightly different way to approach the problem, but it all comes back to, there's no way for this score, for this relay to actually tell the machine, hey, I reset, I'm back at 0. So what it does is it just sends power until it's at 0, and then it stops sending power. And they've wired everything in a way that it will fall out once everything is back to 0. So that's how they work. So I'm going to start cleaning through them. If I run into anything weird, wire broke or anything, I will let you know. But basically, I just got a bunch of time to trek through these and fix 16 score reels. So wish me luck. So this is one of the second player reels. And if you notice, it's very clean. Now, why would that be? It's because nobody plays two-player games. Most of the games on this were probably one-player games. Some people play two-player games. Some people play three-player games, and even less people play four-player games. But as you can see by this, it hasn't been played much. The second-player score reels haven't turned much. That's all we know. Okay. So they're a lot cleaner than the first-player ones. So, and you know, it'll get more and more as it goes along. But not much cleaning to do there. You just clean the reel and get it looking good. Now the reel itself will still be dirty just because of the dirt on top of it. Sometimes you'll get a lot of black soot on it too, because if you look, see like next to the 2 and next to the 3, what's that from? It's the light bulb. It's soot off of the light bulb. So we still got to clean them all. So I'm going to clean them. Still have to clean the switches and keep running through them. All right, so we have cleaned and adjusted all 16 score reels. Whew, that took some doing. So we're ready now. We're going to plug it into the wall and just see if it does anything. Now we don't have the playfield in it yet, so I don't even know if it can even try to start a game without the playfield in it. I think it can, but it tries to reset the bonus unit, which is on the playfield. So I don't know what it'll do if it has no access to the bonus unit. It may believe that it's reset. So I'm going to plug it in, and we'll see what happens with that. Nothing yet. Didn't blow any fuses or anything. Or did it? They've got some flashers in there. It says game over. It says one can play. The 10 is lit up, which is the match number. Okay, so I'm going to try to hit start, and we'll see if all the score reels reset. Now, you might notice I left all of them not on 0. So that they have to reset back to 0. So we're going to see if all of them are doing their thing or if some of them need a little bit more adjustment. Well, just like that, they all went back to 0. So if the playfield was in it, see how the score motor stopped too? If the playfield was in it, it likely would have kicked the ball out, and we could start a game. Very cool. I don't know if there's anything down here I can... If I hit the 5,000 point relay. It gave me 5,000 points. And see here. Ball and play is not lit up, but let's say we do the out-hole relay. So the ball lands in the out-hole. Now on ball number 2. Okay, now we're going to score some more points. Look, there's 500 points. We scored 500 points. Boy, it's fun to play them like this. Out-hole relay. What? Now we're on ball number 3. Is there any more point relays here? Bonus 0, it says. Nope, that's not doing nothing yet. Guess we'll just have to do 5,000 again. $10,500, and then the ball goes into the out hole. Ball number 4. Let's see if the ball goes into the out hole if it does anything without scoring. No, you got to keep it. 500 points again. 11,000. Ball number 4. Ball goes into the out hole. Ball number 5. 500 more points. And then when we lose the ball, it should give us a game over. Seems like it's kind of working. Now you might notice, see how the match is on 10 still? Why didn't that move? It's because we never scored 10 points. That's why they call it the 0 to 90 unit. The thing, if you score 10 points, it'll advance it each time you score 10 points. But everything we scored was hundreds or thousands. So I think we've got that. Going. But I'm going to do one last thing. We're going to look at the light bulbs in the back box so that we can basically say the back box is finished, since the back glass is so nice. There's a little, yeah. So let me flip-flop that down. So here's what it looks like with the glass down. Multiple lights burnt out. They had a lot more flash bulbs in it too, but man, they kind of went a little crazy with it. I'm going to take a lot of them out. So I'm going to swap those out. I'm going to use just regular incandescents like that are in it. I just like the look of those better on the older games. But you could easily put LEDs in as well if you wanted. But I'm going to swap all those out with brand new ones and clean it up a little bit. A little dirt there. But I was able to confirm the back glass is essentially in mint condition. It's perfect. A little dirty, but it's perfect. So there's not a flaw on the entire back glass. And it's a great looking back glass to have a nice perfect example of. So that's pretty cool. So what we're seeing on the front is what a brand new one would have looked like. It's not even faded. All right, I'm going to swap all these light bulbs out real quick, and then we'll see what it looks like once it's basically done. All right, folks. So that is what a nice back glass looks like. Look at that thing. Holy moly. So I took all of the blinking bulbs out. Now, I do like to use those. I use those in lots of back glasses, but this one is just so nice and is so busy. There's so much going on. I didn't want to put any lights in there like drawing your attention to certain areas or anything, because the whole thing's just amazing. And I can tell you right now, I'm looking at it on the camera. The colors are nowhere near as vivid on the camera as they are here in real life. It's just a really nice looking back glass. So what a heck of a piece. That really looks good. But pretty much half the light bulbs were burnt out. But slowly replaced them all. The sockets on these Ballys are a little finicky too. So there's a little clip on the back you have to bend a little bit to make it hold a little better. But we got it all doing its thing. You can also, I turned on all of the 100,000 point lights. So you can see what happens if you roll it. It turns on that light. Well, there you go. So we are done with the back box. Wow. What a great looking game. But we can't play it yet because there's no playfield in it. So in our next video, that's what we'll do. We'll put the playfield back in it. So hope you enjoyed it. Leave your comments below. Let us know what you think. Give us a thumbs up for taking the trouble to film it for you. We appreciate everybody that's been using our Amazon links. Thank you for that. If you don't know about that, there's a link down below to Amazon. If you go to Amazon, from that link, it will give us a tip for sending you there. Also, check out my brother Donnie, who is literally my brother. We have a channel that he runs that's basically his adventures. The Adventures of Donnie. The Adventures of my brother Donnie. And he's always doing something interesting. So he and I bought this little tiny building in Jefferson, South Carolina on Main Street that used to be an old grocery store. It's like a 3,000 square foot building. We've been fixing it up lately and getting it ready to go so that we can rent it to someone. So go check that out if you're into that. If you like old pinball machines, you might like old buildings. So we'll see you over there on that. And make sure to leave your comments below what you think about this machine. Did you ever play this back in the day? Well, we're going to play it here in a couple more episodes. We've got to work on this playfield first and get the thing working. But eventually we're going to be playing this thing. This is a cool game. So we will see you on the next video. Have a good evening.